Today we're going to make a free Windows gaming machine out of an old Mac. Welcome to the basement. So a little bit of backstory to this one. This whole idea was instigated by me trying to play some older games on newer hardware and they just don't work properly. So I thought what I need is old hardware to play the old games on. And it all came to a head when I was trying to play some Command & Conquer Generals. Now, I paid full retail for this back in the early 2000s. And I've played it over the years and enjoyed it, and I still like to play it today. So I went to install it on my current gaming machine, a 2017 iMac running boot camp. And lo and behold, no matter what I did, I could not get this to work. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, oh, just install the Steam version. But I already paid retail for this. I don't want to have to buy it again just to play it on modern hardware. I want the version that I've paid for to work. So there was just one thing left to do, and that is to build a period accurate Windows machine to run these old games on. Now, my one requirement for this machine is that it doesn't cost me any money. I don't want to spend money to build an old machine to play something that I've already paid for. I just want to use something that I've already got, and I've got heaps of stuff here in the basement, so surely I've got something that'll run Windows, no problem. So I had a look around the basement and I cast my eye over all the various machines, and pretty soon I came to the realization that there's not a lot of Windows stuff here. It's mostly Mac stuff or older 16 or 8-bit computers. Certainly nothing that's going to run Windows XP or 7 properly. The closest I could get was this AMD K6 processor in this IBM Aptiva, but it's just not powerful enough to run post-2000 versions of Windows. So I found myself perusing the classifieds and I was starting to wonder maybe I did have to spend some money to get a early 2000s Windows machine. Until my eyes came across this. And I've got a couple of these. It's the MacPro from the early 2000s, and it got me thinking, this would probably make a perfect Windows gaming machine running boot camp. And so that's what we're going to try today. Without spending a cent, I'm going to attempt to build a really competitive mid-2000s gaming machine running Windows. An 8-core Mac Pro. From around 2008-2009, I reckon this will make the perfect mid-2000s gaming system. So a bit of backstory on the Mac Pro. It's not a small computer, it's certainly a tower of power. And they came out to replace the G5 Power Mac. Of course, Apple switched to the Intel processors, and for their high-end workstation product, the Power Mac, that became the Mac Pro with Intel Xeon processors inside. They kept the external case design pretty much the same, just adding an extra optical drive slot here, but the inside was totally changed. There was 5 different versions of this particular Mac Pro over the years, with this one being the 3rd version, right in the middle there. And some would say maybe the least desirable because it was the least upgradable version, but it sports 2 quad-core 2.8 gigahertz processors, giving us 8 cores in total, and I think that's going to be plenty for a mid-2000s gaming machine. And best of all, it's free. I didn't have to pay for it. It was already here in the basement. Now, in keeping with that free ethos, I've got a few upgrades I want to put into this machine without spending money. So I've been raiding my parts bin and I've found a airport card. So this will give this machine Wi-Fi. Hopefully it works under Windows, has the right drivers. I guess we'll wait and see. I've got an SSD, that goes without saying, to put one into this machine. Now when it comes to graphics, these machines always had pretty weak base graphics, and this is a base graphics version with a ATI 2800 XT, I think. Certainly not going to set the world on fire. It'll do dual screens, and that's about all. So in my parts bin, I found this. It's an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 650 Ti with 2 gig of RAM, and that should up the performance quite a bit if it works in there. Hopefully it does, and it should work quite well under Windows. It might not work so good under the Mac operating system, but that remains to be seen. So that's that. Now, what about RAM, I hear you say? Well, let's have a look in the machine and see how much RAM it's got at the moment. So one of the best features of these Mac Pros, and what really made them pro, was the fact that they could be easily accessed and upgraded. So if I flick this lever at the back here, the side panel just folds down nicely, comes away, and gives us access to everything we need. Now, looking in here, it's pretty dusty, But we've got our RAM here, so let's pull that out and see how much is in this machine. So the RAM is just on these daughter cards. They slide out, and we can see here we've got 4 sticks of RAM in this card. Let's pull out the top one, which is upside down, and we've got 4 sticks of RAM in this one as well. So it looks like this daughter board has 4 4GB sticks of HP server grade RAM, so that's 16 gig there, and the other daughter board is exactly the same. So 2 16s, that's 32 gig of RAM. 32 gig of RAM is actually an incredible amount of RAM for a mid-2000s gaming machine. In fact, the amount of RAM has made me think I'm going to put Windows 7 on this machine and not Windows XP, because the amount of RAM that this has, Windows 7 will be able to take advantage of it better, and Windows 7 should run everything that Windows XP should run, hopefully. So we'll find out. Now, if there's any MacPro aficionados out there, you may have spotted that the door for this MacPro is actually off the earlier model. You probably didn't spot that because it's a very hard thing to spot. But the graphic on here, which tells you how to replace the RAM, is for the earlier model. And the reason it's got a different door on it is because the door that came with this machine was covered in scratches and looked pretty horrible. This one does have a few scratches on it, but it looks a lot nicer. So I've swapped it over with an older machine that I have. As part of the nifty design, it's got toolless hard drive bays here. So they're in the lock position at the moment, as you'd have it with the door closed. If I open the lever, which would open the door, it also unlocks the hard drive caddies. So you'd screw your hard drive in that, and you'd just be able to slide it into the machine. Takes 4 of them, so a really convenient way to add 4 hard drives to your machine. So we're getting a look down into the machine, and as part of the toolless design, we've got these captive screws holding this kind of board thing, this bracket in place, and that holds our expansion cards in there. So we can undo those, and that should just pop out nicely. And now we can just slide these cards out. There we go. There's our IDE to SATA adapter card, which needs a clean as well. And there's our super powerful graphics card. Look at the flames on that shroud. That indicates that it's super powerful. Oh, it's got to catch down there. We should undo first. Come on. There we go. Whew, there's another dusty old card. Yeah, so 2 monitors, but not much else. Anyway, that's going to... We might need this to get it booted, but we'll wait and see. I'll put it to the side and give it a clean. Okay, and then we have a look at... What is that, a poo or is that a ball of dust? Oh, it's just dust, it's not a poo. When it comes to your next project, you can either do it the wrong way or the PCB way. That's right, PCBWay does PCBs, but also sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing, and even CNC machining. Whatever crazy idea in your head can be turned into reality at PCBWay.com. So one thing I really like about the design of the MacPro case is the consideration given for airflow and thermal efficiency. So we've got 2 large fans on the front here, and we've got 1 fan on the back of the case, and so that creates a wind tunnel through the 2 processors inside this shroud here. We've got the RAM inside this shroud, and that pulls the air all the way through out the back and keeps everything nice and cool. This fan up here pushes over the cards that you've got installed and cools the hard drives down as well. Maybe not so much the front one, but certainly these 3 will benefit from that. We've got a power supply at the top of the case, which is a good place for it because the power supply gets quite warm as well, and we're not radiating that heat up through the case. That's got its own fan on the back, and that's drawing air through the optical drives and out the back of the case again. So really good design thermally, and it should work well for what we want to use it for. So I think it's time to get in there and start pulling things apart so we can get in and give it a proper clean. So I'm just going to start by undoing all the screws I can find and start pulling stuff out and try and get the board bare so I can give it a nice clean and just get everything shipshape and looking nice and new again. Okay, I think I've managed to, yes, that's the processor shroud. Come on, yes. So I've just noticed that the processor shroud is actually magnetically attached. Well, it's supposed to be magnetically attached, except the magnets are still stuck on here. The glue on the magnets have failed, so that magnet should be stuck in there, like so. Oh, no, it doesn't want to stick. And then when you put the shroud back on, it just holds it in place. Apple, what are you doing? Go back to this awesome user accessible design. Such a lot of clever little features to make it easy. I've got everything back together. Everything's clean. I've got rid of all of the dust, so much dust. But it's ready now to test out. I don't think I've ever actually turned this machine on, so it's probably a good time to test it just with a normal Mac OS on here and see if it actually turns on before we try and put Windows on it. So let's try that. I've populated the cards back in, and I've put a hard drive into the adapter card, and I've put the original graphics card back in because I know that Mac OS will boot with that in there. I've got this hard drive with various flavors of Mac OS on it. Hopefully one of them boots on this machine. So I'll find a monitor and plug it in and see what happens. Okay, I've connected everything. I've found this old cinema display, keeping everything with the theme of Apple. Apple keyboard, Apple mouse obviously. And nothing left to do but to turn on the machine. So power button's on the front here somewhere. There it is. It's a bit noisy, the fan. There might be something rubbing in there. I'll have to... Ooh. And I dare say it's looking through the hard drive. There's quite a few partitions on that hard drive, so it might take a while. Hopefully it finds a bootable one and boots into an operating system. But so far, signs are pretty good. So there we go, it's booted into El Cap and it's looking pretty happy. I've done it. I've finally done it. Future Johan here. Look at his happy little face. The reason being because it's taken him a long time to get to this point, but little does he know he's not there yet. There's still a lot more for him to do. Let's start back at the beginning. First of all, we had some dodgy RAM, but a reseat seemed to fix that okay, so just reseated and away we went. But the next issue I discovered was that there was no option in the boot camp to create a boot USB for some reason. So I struggled with this for quite a while, installing an older version of macOS and everything, until I finally found some random forum post where I could edit the plist file and change the settings inside there to allow this particular Mac to then write Windows 7 to a USB, which I did, and then found out that after all of that, the reason why it doesn't show up in the boot camp is because the MacPro 3.1 will not boot Windows from a USB. So a DVD is needed, but I didn't have any DVDs, so I thought I'd be clever and run the Windows installer off a second hard drive installed in the machine and install it to another hard drive. But then I found out that Windows would only boot if both hard drives were still in the machine, and I didn't want that. So back to the drawing board, I found some blank CDs and I burnt a very lightweight version of Win 7 on there, and that seemed to boot up fine and everything was working okay. Then I started getting these crashes to black screen, and the fans would spin up full bore and this would happen continuously. So that was quite frustrating. When I could get it to work though, it wasn't quite good enough because the Win 7 off the disk was only 32-bit. So I found some random hard drive in my travels and it seemed to have Ubuntu Linux on it, and it just booted up, everything worked, sound worked, all the drivers were in there. It was kind of a random little escapade, but this is not a Linux video, so let's keep moving. I tried replacing all of the different hardware, the power supply, fiddled around with different RAM configurations, I swapped out the graphics card, everything I could think of. And you know what, I just kept getting those crashes to black screen. It would happen in Windows and it would happen in Mac OS. So that was kind of frustrating, but I persevered. I went down to the shop, I bought some DVDs, blank ones, I burnt Windows 7 full version onto the DVD. I installed it onto an SSD in the MacPro, went to fire it up, and I kept getting these crashes. So after all that, I was not able to get the Mac Pro to work reliably. It just kept crashing. And I did some research and I found out that the Mac Pro 3.1, some of the units had this issue where the screen will black out and the fans will come on full. And that's exactly what my unit was doing. And I read a bit further in these forum posts and nobody knew what caused it. No one knew how to fix it. So it looks like we had got to the end of the road with that particular machine, which is why I've got this machine. It's a different machine. I got an earlier one. I had both machines here in the basement, and so I dragged this older machine out. Now, I didn't really want to use this machine because cosmetically it's not as good, and it's a slower machine as well. It's only a quad-core 2.6 gigahertz machine, but you know, it works, it's reliable, so I'm going to go with it. I was able to pinch the RAM from the later machine. It takes the same kind of RAM, so we've got full 32 gig of RAM in here. I'm pretty sure that's maxed out for this machine. We've put the NVIDIA GeForce card in here. We've got the Wi-Fi card in here. I've got a solid state drive. And have I managed to get Windows installed on it? Yes, I did. And because the machine wasn't crashing every 5 minutes, it was actually a much easier process. So it turns out that most of the issues I was having with the last machine was just the fact that it was crashing a lot. So the other thing I've done is I've managed to get a larger monitor here. This was in my collection as well. And why not go the bigger monitor for a gaming machine? Anyway, enough of me talking. Let's turn it on and I'll show you what it can do. Takes a while to boot chime because it's checking all 32 gig of RAM there before it sounds its chime. And there it goes. And we're not going to see anything on the screen for a while because the graphics card is not flashed for the BIOS for a Mac, so it doesn't show anything until it starts booting into Windows. So there's no Mac OS hard drive in here, only a Windows drive. I've removed anything, all the Mac drives out of it. So it's purely just a Windows machine now. And there we go, Windows 7 on its way. Updates. Can you ever get away from Windows updates? Right, it's finally booted. So this is our Windows 7 desktop. Everything's running off a 500 gig SSD. I've also got, what's it saying there? I'm out of support. I know it's out of support, you have to tell me. And you can see I've installed already a bunch of my games on here from my games library. So just before we fire up anything, I'll show you in the computer. Our Windows Experience Index is getting a 7.3. Now that tops out at 7.9. So even though this machine is 3 years before they launched Windows 7, it's still able to score an almost top mark. In fact, this is only 7.3 because of the disk data transfer rate. Everything else, including graphics and processor, they're all at 7.6. So that's only 0.3 away from the very top mark that it could possibly get. So Windows reckons it's a pretty good machine. And so do I, actually. It seems to run all the games fine. Now, the thing that sparked off this whole adventure was getting Command & Conquer original version working. Now, I installed it and I did have some trouble getting it working. I had to disable some sort of something or other. Anyway, if you're doing the same thing, Google it, it'll be out there somewhere. I had to get into the command line and disable something or enable it, I can't remember. But I did get it going. So just to prove that, I need to insert the CD-ROM. 1 minute. Okay, disk installed. Let's run Command & Conquer. Great, finally I've got it working on a Windows machine. So mission accomplished, really. Now I do enjoy this game, but now in this modern era, it does seem like it's 20 years since this game was made, and it kind of comes across as a bit racist now. You know, the terrorists are all kind of like from the Middle East, and the Chinese have a very Chinese accent, but you know, that's how things were 20 years ago. So that's the machine running great, doing everything I wanted it to do. Now, was it free? So yes, the actual machine was free. Somebody gave it to me. It was pretty damaged when I got it. The feet were broken. I've had to rivet them back on. But yeah, I didn't pay anything for it. The graphics card was free. I didn't pay anything for that. I did buy this monitor some years ago now, but I bought it for my collection, not for a gaming PC, so I'm kind of calling it free. The peripherals were free as well. So in essence, yes, it is a free retro gaming PC. The one thing I did have to go out and buy though were some DVDs, some blank DVDs, because the last time I had blank DVDs was probably about 10 years ago, and I looked around and thought I might have some somewhere. I asked my friends and no one had any anymore, so I had to actually go to a shop and buy blank DVDs. So all in all, that's a really good result. I'm really happy with that, and it's going to be a great gaming machine, and it's a good use for these old Macs because they're not that useful running Mac OS anymore, but they're going to be very useful as a retro Windows gaming PC. You've been in the basement. Have a great day.